Glory be to God in the highest. Have you ever wondered that somebody was allowed to stay with a king, a prominent king of that nature, for like 6 months or 1 year? Coming out with a king, going in with a king, sleeping with a king, dining with a king, going to everywhere with a king. But immediately he came out of the palace, we cannot see the horror. We cannot see the mentality. We cannot see any change in his life that he stayed with the king for almost just 1 year. You know this is the case of many Christians nowadays. Psalm 45 verse 1 said, the psalmist said, my heart is inditing a good matter. He said, I spake of the things which I have made touching the king. He said, and my tongue has become the pen of a ready writer. So the psalmist was simply saying that part of things that he learned while staying with the King of Kings is that his heart has been taught how to indite a good matter, how to think about a good matter, how to think positively, how to see himself not as a pauper, but as somebody that is a giver. Not to see himself as somebody that is being employed, but as an employee. So I am pushing it to you now, since you said you have been dining with the king. As a Christians, we are called into a relationship that is like Christ is our king. And you have stayed with him 6 months, 1 year, 5 years, 10 years. But up till now, we cannot see the horror. We cannot see the mindset of the king that you are living. We cannot see that you have robbed with the king maybe once or twice. So your life denied that you have an access to the King of Kings. So when will you start inditing a good matter? When will you start thinking that you are not going to be the product of other people's change, but that you are going to influence people for God's kingdom? When will you start to live your life not as somebody that is being influenced in the wrong way, but to be an influence upon others? When you start thinking that you are not a beggar, but a giver. When you start thinking a good matter, that you are not going to be just an employee, but an employer. When you start thinking that you are not meant to just stay and live on the meager, but to be somebody that will be paying people salaries. When will you start doing that? He said, the psalmist said, my heart is inditing a good matter. When you start thinking that you can make a great exploit for the Lord. When you start thinking that you can finish that house, start that business. When will you start thinking that the responsibility of the responsibility is upon you? When will you start thinking like that? When will you start thinking that you can do something great for the Lord? When you start thinking that even in that your church, you will not expecting something from them, but to give to them. When you start thinking that you are not a beggar, but you are a giver. When you start that business, when you start living the life that you have, the mindset of what you have gotten from the king. Isaiah chapter 60 was talking about the light has come and we rise up to our light. But he came to a place, he said the kings will come to the brightness of our rising. So if you have not learned anything, the more you stay with the king, the time at which you are fellowshipping with the King of Kings, you have wasted it. The psalmist said, my heart is inditing a good matter. When will you think that the world is looking for you, that the world needs you the most? You don't really need it. They needed you the most. When will you start thinking that way? When you start thinking that you can make a change to happen in your environment, when you start living in silence, when God has built you to be a giant. So my heart is inditing a good matter. So many Christians nowadays, they have been developed their mind to indict a bad matter. Everything they see, they are skeptical about it. They are optimistic, they are pessimistic about it. When somebody brings something, all they see is evil out of everything. They never see opportunity. They never see responsibility. They never see a chance to rise in the kingdom of God. So their heart has been developed into indicting a bad matter. When they sleep, they don't think that God will visit them. All they think about is that they are going to have a nightmare. When they go to the church, they don't think that they are going to be the one that God is going to use even to change the mindset of the people about Christ in their church. They only think that the people will affect them. So when you start indicting a good matter, many people, many Christians, they just wake up every day. Anytime they see a bad news, that is what they spread. So when will you start thinking, indicting a good matter, that you can be in the hands of affairs, that you can be a student, that you can pass your exams, that you can be somebody that will mentor others in the ways of the Lord, that you can be somebody that people will come and look up to, that you become the salt of the heart that Jesus has called you, that you become the light of the world that he has called you to be. So David said, my heart is indicting a good matter. I speak of the things which I have made touching the king. So what have you made touching the king? Jesus is the King of Kings. You have been with him 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. What have you made? Has that reflected in your life? And the psalmist said, because of what I made touching him, my experience with him, what he has done to me, how my mind has changed, how he has renewed my mind. He said, my tongue is now the pen of a ready writer. It's because you have not taken note of what you made with the king. That is why your mouth is not been made the pen of a ready writer. If you ask you now, you have nothing to say. Can I call you today that being with the King of Kings is a chance for you to indict a good matter, to think like a king, to think like an influencer, to think like a giver, to think like a changer, to think like a change agent. That is what God is calling us. So my heart is indicting a good matter. I speak of the things which have made touching the king. My tongue is a pen of a ready writer. Children of God, is high time. You are dining with the king. What is your experience? What has he rubbed on you? You are still thinking about the battles of your household. What have you learned? What have you learned staying with Christ? You are still thinking that the witches and the witches are chasing you in your dream. What have you learned? What have you learned? What have you learned? You're still thinking that you always be a beggar. What have you learned? What have you learned? It doesn't show that you have been with the king. So this is a wake-up call. My heart is indicting a good matter. I speak of the things which have made touching the king. My tongue has become the pen of a ready writer. This is a kingship relationship, and it must show to the world. See you some other time. God bless you.